Warning: this will be talking about topics that might trigger you. Be aware before continuing on watching and listening to this episode. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to another podcast of Paolo's podcast. I'm really excited. Today is the myth, the legend, and probably, I think, in my opinion, one of the top psychologists in the country is Dr. Russell A. Bourne. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think I'd be in front of you and be able to be on this campaign to move me forward. He's pretty much kept me moving in a positive direction. And out of all the years, through all my different practices and endeavors, he's been truly one of the only mentors that's gotten through to me. And I have a couple of reasons why, but one of the main topics is, besides of being an amazing psychologist, is his compassion. And how we met is just, I can't put into words. And I always try to push the boundaries with him and connect. And he's a straight shooter, but his heart is pure gold, and he helps so many people. So I've been truly blessed by having him in my life. Unfortunately, since the COVID virus, we haven't been able to connect on a session since the virus broke out. So we've been communicating, and Dr. Borne has been, doing the best he can via satellite, and everybody's trying to, work around the situation, the dilemma that we're in right now. So in today's chapter, in part one, I'm going to just basically, and this is going to help us out with our apprentice program. These are some of the questions that our psychology, neurology students from around the country and a college apprentice program have written down. First, Dr. Bourne, we wanted to find out a little bit I know a lot, but since the public doesn't, about your background, what brought you into psychology, and since you had probably a lot of choices and with your brain and being so academically smart. So what originally excited you about this going into this industry?
Well, it's a fair question, and it's more difficult to answer than you might think. I didn't start out wanting to be a psychologist. I was just a college student. A couple of courses very, very much caught me and my attention: abnormal psychology, psychopathology, child and adolescent development. But I didn't go to college thinking I would be studying those subjects. I went to college to be a math major, and I like solutions. I like solving problems. And once I knew there were human problems that perhaps could be approached with a bit of a methodology, the way you would solve an algebra equation, that was interesting to me. It was the time of Vietnam, and so staying in graduate school was important to all of us. So in part, it was also keeping myself out of Vietnam, going to graduate school. But then it became more than that. It was not just an escape, because as you said, there were other options and availability of choices for me. And I learned later that actually the military wouldn't have been such a bad choice as a career field when I went to work for the CIA for 24 years and found that I enjoyed the military people very much in my work with them. So long answer to a pretty direct question, but it was a roundabout path. It wasn't a path that was direct and known to me. And I think that's been true for my postgraduate years as well. I never knew I would work for the CIA. I never knew that I would be interested in psychopharmacology. I never knew that I would be interested in teaching graduate students or training other psychologists. These things just kind of come along, and if they are interesting, then you say yes. And once you've said yes, then you put all you have, all this available to you, right, in terms of your time and your intellect, into doing it. So that's how I got to where I am.
Now, because after our sessions, since I have memory issues, I keep a journal of our sessions and stuff that we exchange, either personally or therapeutic coping skills and tools. So I could, I'm always asking you for homework. And I don't know if that's what your other patients do, but that is my method of working with you that's been working pretty well. Is that if I remember correctly, is you were a dean at a small college. Was that before you went into the CIA, or was that after?
It was actually concurrent with.
Oh, we could, because I remember we had, and you always were very professional and ethical about this was our time. We're not talking about Dr. Bourne fishing or anything else. We focused on Paolo's issues, and the hours, well, we fly by. So, but I do remember one session when I think, I don't know how the story got started, but you would say that we'd have the CIA would get the best of the best, the brightest minds, and some would fall off the charts and some would make it who you weren't expected. I forgot how you actually worded it, but they go out and recruit. So if you were doing once had the recruitment process, like for our apprentices, if they're interesting, following in your footsteps, since our campaign is growing. And I should also mention that Dr. Russell Bourne is our vice president of our campaign, is also too, and has been a mentor and an advisor. So he's also invested in this mission that we're going behind. But back to my question is that how would somebody, how did they find you, or did you apply, or is there a story of, like we see in the movies, and especially like I think at our first meeting, is it Jason Bourne, like the movies?
Yeah. So there's a story. In my case, I was recruited by them. I was already a psychologist when they contacted me. But today, if a psychologist wanted to go to work for the Central Intelligence Agency, they could contact them directly. And there would be, a variety of choices for them to work. They might work in selection and recruitment. They might work in testing and evaluation. They might work in research. They might work in mental health. They might become an analyst. They might decide that they want to use their problem solving and analytical skills to be an analyst for the agency. They could go and become a case officer. I mean, there are all sorts of opportunities. I was recruited for special work, and the story is interesting. I don't know that it's going to be interesting to everybody who watches this, so I don't have to go into it, but it was.
Oh, please do.
Well, you can imagine getting a phone call and someone says, hi, is this Dr. Bourne? And I say, yes. And he goes, well, this is Paolo with the CIA. I'd like to talk to you about working for me. And I said, yeah, right, sure, Paolo. What can I help you with? He says, well, would you be willing to come up to headquarters and we could talk about it? And I said, no, actually, if you're interested that much in me, you can come down here to my office and talk to me. So about 3 weeks later, my secretary came in and said, Dr. Bourne, there's a guy here from the government. He said, you told him to come down to see you. And I was pretty full of myself. And I said, well, let's just let him wait for a few minutes. And so he let the guy sit out there for about 15 minutes. And then I went out and I said, I'm Dr. Bourne, how can I help you? And he says, well, we had a brief conversation. You said if I was interested to show up, here I am. He showed me his credentials. We went in and spoke. And, as they say, the rest is history. I enjoyed my conversation. I went back up to the agency with him. You go through, some evaluation and background check and lie detector and all of that sort of stuff. And then I was given an assignment.
And at that point, you were the dean at that university you were talking about?
I was an associate dean.
Associate dean. So right. This is when they came back. So so it was just the exciting pitch, and like, again, I can only imagine it like I see Hollywood, like most of probably our viewers. So there had to have been something like, because did you have your family at that time, or were you single?
So there wasn't any excitement about it, to tell you the truth. So it was 1984. Wasn't anything going on in the world. The Cold War was kind of dull in some ways. There wasn't anything else happening. And when I went to work for them, I think my father sort of explained it. He said he figured that was my civic duty, that somehow I was replacing the CIA with the military service I didn't serve a decade earlier, and that it was just my way of being, a good citizen. But it wasn't. So again, 1984, there weren't any Jason Bourne movies. I mean, Robert Ludlum had written the very first of the series, but were no movies. I don't think anybody was really excited about the CIA. The CIA tried to keep a low profile. They didn't want a lot of publicity at different times, both overt and covert employees, or so you could let somebody know or not let somebody know. So for a while, people didn't know. Then I asked for permission to be able to, as they say, read in a family member. So, I was traveling some. I wanted my parents to know why I wasn't around and stop making up stories about going to a convention or going to give a talk or lecture and be gone for 2 weeks. I mean, it was a little suspicious, so to speak. So that was sort of interesting.
So even at the level, no matter whatever the assignment is, you have to be confidential. You can't tell anybody where you go or anything like that.
It depends on the assignment, of course. It depends on what you're doing, and where you are and who you're working with, right? So
now, were you doing general practice before then too? Because I remember you telling me some other situations and this is what immediately made me fall in love with you and really get close to you and say, wow, this man is the right guy for me, even though there's so many excellent psychologists out there, is just you put me in a trust. I felt very in a safe place with you. Were you practicing before that? Because you said you were associate at the university, a dean, and were you practicing? So you had like the basics. We just had on Dr. Kelly Everson, who specializes in child psychology. So did you have the full range up until this point of all the techniques and the skills?
well, I don't, it's like asking a physician if they've ever been, they've ever completed their education, right? So I didn't have the range of skills in 1984. I hope that I had in 1986. I hope the range grew in those 2 years. I got my PhD in 1980. Now I know to you, that seems like a long time ago, but 40 years went by in a hurry for me. And I got an early start. So, but everything I did, I wanted to be as skilled in it as I could. So in 1982, I saw some children in my private practice, but mostly I saw adults, young adults, college students, and just recent college graduates. But I'd never seen traumatic brain injury patients in 1983, 4, 5, 6. It was probably late 80s before that crossed my path. So I didn't, hopefully we're all learning all the time, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Now, what made you then, so you started doing that type of practice, then you went to be the dean at the university, if I followed correctly. And then what made you, like you said, the civic duty, but was there anything else? Because I know you're a competitor as well as a former athlete. Is that something that excites you? This is a new challenge, because I'm sure the training goes up a higher level, right? When you go into work for the government and stuff like that, you have to have another set of skill sets, correct?
Right. So the academic training continued somewhat because of the agency, but I think where I found the challenge, and you sort of touched on it, at being somewhat competitive and a little bit athletic, is that I took advantage of every opportunity that they gave me. So, so I had a lot of training, and that wasn't what a psychologist would ordinarily get, whether it was physical training or small arms training or evasive driving techniques or spycraft, whatever it was. That usually doesn't come from a seminar of the American Psychological Association, right? So that training was more or less specific to the intelligence community, and that was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed learning a lot of different things.
Wow.
And I was young. And Paolo, remember, so at that time I was still in my early 30s, but some of our recruits were in their mid 20s. And so if I was going to earn their respect, it wasn't going to be because I was the experienced psychologist on the scene. There weren't any other psychologists doing what I was doing. I was the only guy around for a little while, and then there grew a bit. It's not true. I wasn't the only, but it was a very small cadre of about 6 of us. And then that grew to a group of about 30. But my point really was going to be that when I was in my early 30s, I wanted to have the regard of these very fit and strong young adult males, which meant I had to be fit and strong and then smart too, right? And so I enjoyed that part of the job. I enjoyed all of the physicality that the training, allowed.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Just as you, I know how much you like the physical life.
Used
Right?
to. uh, so when did you get to travel around the whole world and stuff at that time? Did they get you again, like I visualized this story of Dr. Bourne in my head of playing a Brad Pitt role or something. Do they place you up so you have to be able to adapt to any situation? And it's not about your physical stature, it's about your noggin, how much logic you have, right?
Right. Well, it's probably not nearly as romantic or exciting as it is in your head. So we
Uh,
can we can let you keep the imagination alive. And I can tell you that I've been on 6 of the 7 continents, but some of that was lost experience because I was just in a small area. I didn't really get to explore. It wasn't like I was a tourist or a traveler who could really enjoy whatever country I was in necessarily. So while I can say I've had my feet planted on 6 of the 7 continents, I can't tell you that I've explored the territory of anything more than North American continent. That's about it, right? So.
What advice would you give our students or apprentices that are in the master's programs about researching if they wanted to go follow your footsteps, and any information that you would mentor someone that would be interested in going into this level of career? Like you said, it's not like the movies. These are really the skill sets, and you got to be like used to tell some of my kids that I used to work with, it's great. You want to be a center at UCLA, but you're 5'5", so it's going to be kind of challenging. So, so what other skill sets do you think they should really be honing in? And what I've been realizing a lot with a little bit of my frustration with the educational system is they're not learning real life experience. So what they taught you in the books, getting your PhD, how much of that was actually applicable to apply for your position? Did they pretty much say, throw away those books, Dr. Bourne, we're going to train you our way, and this is how it's going to be?
Absolutely not. I mean, they
Okay.
may train me as that was augmented training, right? Training on top of training, but you couldn't have that training if you hadn't had the foundational training. So everything I learned in college and graduate school and professional school, on internship, all of it was important. The way our mind works, sometimes we tend to collapse things into a particular interaction with a particular faculty member or a particular project, and we learned a lot from that. I also collapsed some of my life learnings into conversations that I might have had with my father or with an uncle, right? That put me in good stead. My father was in the hardware business, hardware stores. He was an entrepreneur in Virginia Beach. And so knowing contractors, my summer jobs were sort of already lined up. One summer with the plumber, one summer with the electrician, one summer with the framing carpenter. So it was easy for me to get a summer job. The point of saying that is that every morning for the first week of any new job, I could count on my father saying, all right, remember the 4 basics. And then he would say, you show up early, you listen, you work hard, and you don't complain. And, you start hearing that when you're a 14-year-old boy. Show up early, listen, work hard, don't complain. I take that, if I go take those guidelines into practice at the CIA. I'm showing up early. I'm listening. What's expected of me? What am I learning through my ears? How am I paying attention? I'm working hard, right? And I'm not complaining. No one's interested in my complaints, right? They're interested in getting the job done. You come into my office. I'm going to show up early. I'm there for you. I want to be there for you. So I make an effort to be there for you. And I listen. And then I work hard. What does that mean? How do I put the pieces together? How do I try to make sense in a way that I think will be useful for you, right? And I don't complain about you didn't do this homework properly, or you didn't call on time, or you're not paying attention now in class, Paolo. I mean, that's not it. I'm not complaining. We don't complain. right? We do what we do it as well as we can do it. And you, right, just like the guys at the agency or the patients that I saw this afternoon, they set the pace, right? This is their time. This is their need. It's not my time. It's not my need, right? It's their time. They set the pace, right? And I might, set a little bit of the direction, but I'm following them. They set the pace. They lead the direction, right? So I think maybe in the beginning, one of the reasons that you and I had a nice rapport is that, so we talk about our fantasies about how we think the other person's life might have been before we met them. You were a very competitive athlete, a professional athlete. I didn't do anything professionally. And I think, and then as a coach, you came out of an environment where people told people what to do, not for good reason, but you trained people, you coached them, but you coached them, if you were like a lot of coaches, with a schedule. You showed up and it was your schedule and this is what we're doing now. And you led, you set the pace, you set the direction. Psychologists don't really do that, I think, the ones who do it better. But my fantasy was that perhaps when you had been with other psychologists or counselors, they had an idea of what was right for you and they tried to tell you what was right for you or tried to get you to follow their ideas of what was right for you. Where when you and I met, it wasn't about me. It was about what you might be able to do for you. You've given me credit sometimes. The credit didn't belong to me. I wasn't the one that helped the situation get to where it went. You were, right? You did that. Did this whole thing, concussion, pain management, mental health. None of this was Russell Bourne. All
Yeah,
this was no.
You planted the seed.
I'm not sure what seed I planted, but this is the bush that grew from it. Okay. Right. So I all we did was visit. You created all of this, right? And a good psychologist has a way of visiting and talking, and it comes with some time, and it becomes not really so formalized. It's very, as you used the term appropriately earlier today, it's organic, right? It evolves. The connection and the pace and the direction sort of comes about that interaction between the two of us. And we're both listening. We both show up early. We both listen. We both do what we're there to do. We don't get fussy with each other. We don't complain. Sometimes something very nice can happen.
Well, I mean, I was probably going to go on to the next segment, but I mean, what you said, what were the 4 steps that you just said? So I could write those down because they could be applied to anything that you said with the CIA. Listen, work hard. Can you repeat those again?
Show up early.
Show up early.
Listen.
Work hard.
Don't complain.
That could probably be one of the coping skills. I told you that because that's how I was raised. The third one, I guess the fifth one was my father says, if you don't have money in your pocket, you don't leave home. So, meaning you don't want somebody else to pay for your meal and be a parasite. So you go out, shovel snow, you get money, you get your own money and give you that work ethic. So I guess it falls into that. But if those pretty much guidelines, those rules could, a lot of things, not that I'm mentoring that many children anymore, just the college apprentices that are helping us with our campaign and getting real life experience through their majors, is that that's something it's hard to teach those characteristics. Is it because you think your father inbred that in you and my dad did that as well, or is there any theory behind that?
Well, I think part of it is probably the history that your father shared and my father shared taught them those lessons, and so they're trying to do their thing of share the lessons down with us, right? And there are these little expressions that I don't know that new expressions get created, right? I mean, we tend to rely on these sage expressions from times past, and they probably continue to exist because they were sensible. They guided people in sensible ways, right? If you're not early, you're late. It's an interesting phrase. If you're not early, you're late, because it's hard to be right on time. So you have to make a decision. Are you going to show up early or are you going to show up late? Right? My dad said you show up early. Your father's comment about money, my father's comment, although said a little differently, he said, you can only spend, let's see how he said, you can't spend the same dollar in two places. So the lesson there was you be careful with your money. Once you've spent it, you can't spend it again. You can't spend the same dollar in two places. So if you're buying shoes, then you're also not buying tires for your car, which are more important, right? You're going out and taking this girl out to dinner, and you don't have gas for next week to get back and forth to work. What are you trying to be a show off? I mean, you can't spend the same dollar in two places. Yeah. Right. So priorities, values, things like that. And, the old, any job worth doing is worth doing right? Why do something if you're not going to do it as well as you can do it? And if that's not your goal, your motive, then go find something else that you really feel substantial connection or passion, as they like to say, and do that. But don't do things halfway.
Do you have a suggestion? I guess it's probably because I know you're such a professional that unless the patient's in front of you, you really don't like to give advice until you can really size them up. But this is kind of a generic question: is that because I believe that quitting can be contagious. If that's when I used to coach with the kids, no matter if they were a great athlete or a bad athlete, as long as they gave me 100%, I don't care if you're All-American or you barely made the JV team. I would give them a big, well, now you can't hug a kid, but right, I'd high five them and high five them or whatever they did just because they completed. And I said, see, because they would get halfway through a drill and say, I can't do this. And I said, look, we have other kids around here, but cursing, I'm a little bit loose on if you guys are old enough, but can't is a curse word in my world. Because you can do anything as long as you work hard enough. But you said if you move on, do you recommend for young adults or even adults, I guess, when do you actually, because when we quit, and you can use me as an example, how many times have I tried to commit suicide or talked about it with you? And in a sense, it's been that I look at it as it's always like, it hurts me now or switch in my head where I think if I commit suicide, it's a form of quitting and giving up, and it could be a selfish and there's collateral damage that happens through that. So I feel if I fall into the pain and I quit, then I'm letting down people that are starting to really connect to our campaign and our goals to help other people. But if people on the short stuff on a short list is that a kid, tries soccer one day and his mother wants him just to get away from the video games and get him out in the field. I don't want to do that. I want to quit. There's totally different ways of doing it. How much would you coach a kid or coach an adult to stay in the game for, or try it to know that you are ready? It's not for you. Or is that an impossible question to answer?
Well, I don't have an easy answer for the question because, of course, part of it is dependent upon the age of the child or adolescent or the adult. How capable are they of having perspective, of looking into the future and imagining what it might be like if they gave it another 6 weeks or 6 months, right? What is the outcome that they would hope for? I don't know that all quitting is wrong. Right. I mean, there are probably some folks who've left jobs by quitting an unproductive, maybe even a destructive position. Our culture allows divorce. All right. So some people regard that as quitting a marriage or leaving, So I think there are times when it's it's enough. I'm not going to be the gymnast that I wanted to be. I'm not going to be the dancer that I wanted to be. And the child or adolescent or college student says no. Now, there are always those stories, that are almost apocryphal. The journeyman golfer who never won a tournament And he stayed with it from age 26 to 42. And finally, he wins, right? And someone would say, see there? You stay with anything for 17 years, you might win. But he could have won who knows what else in those other 17 years if he had decided, golf isn't for me. But that he didn't decide that, right? He made a decision to show up every day, early, probably at the driving range, to work hard, right? To listen to whatever a coach was telling him, and to not complain about not winning. I'm on the tour. I'm going to keep playing, and I'm going to keep playing. And eventually he played well enough to win. So, the young kid, the soccer kid, he didn't have enough time to know if he liked soccer, right? He just knows it's harder than the video game, maybe, or less enjoyable to him than the video game. That's all he knows. So I would want him to be fair to himself. How does he know he's being fair? By stopping early, right? Or good for himself.
And is it hard to put that pressure on a kid to make that decision? Or like, I never knew how to talk to the parents and say, listen, if your son doesn't like it, we shouldn't force him to do something that he doesn't like. But at the same time is that healthy balance of, is it too soon? Maybe we change his position. Maybe we do this. Maybe we get him, make him feel more of the team. It's a social. It's not about scoring the goals, and try to think of other things that excite him and motivate him. Is that applied to when I'm trying to use that analogy for the work world? So when they don't back out, if they don't like the job the first 2 weeks because it's the training, that they stick it out because the payoff doesn't come immediately. It comes down the road. So,
right. You can think of college or graduate school like that, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who drop out of college after one semester or 1 year because they don't like it. It's not for them. And they don't see 3 years from now. So to make it a local example, how many people do you think show up at Disney World, pay the $85 or $125, whatever the price is these days? They go in and they ride 2 rides or go to 2 events, and they leave. I mean, they don't do that.
right.
They don't do that. They try to get as much out of that $95 experience as they can.
Yeah.
Well, I think college students should do the same thing. Don't just go to one class, go to the second class, decide college isn't for you. Did you go to any lectures? Did you go to sporting events? Did you go here? Whatever, get your money's worth. This is a very expensive operation. Right?
Yes.
Now, you can't spend the same dollar in 2 places. So if you're spending $1 at college, get the most for that dollar you can.
That's what we're preaching with our apprentice program, is when we're speaking to a couple of the universities, in the Ivy League programs, and the career advisors are saying, the kids aren't, unless it's a paid position like $10 an hour, the kids aren't really looking for that internship. And I tell them, I said, this is a return on your investment, because you're getting real life experience. You get to work with a collaborative specialist in your field, it should be a class, because a lot of since I had, my dyslexia, is a lot of my real learning was visual learning, listening, and almost those 4 rules that you should show up early, work hard. All this thing keeps on circling back to me. And I figured I might not be the most talented person, but I'll sure as heck work the person next to me. And that was the way of even the playing field for me.
Right.
So, all right. So we're going to finish up this segment, and then we'll be back next Wednesday with Dr. Bourne to commit to finish chapter 2, which is on coping skills, and get some of this other exciting stories from Dr. Bourne.
Thank you for watching Paolo's podcast. This concludes Chapter 1 with Dr. Bourne. Please tune in next week, January 20th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for Chapter 2. As of 2021, CPMHA has launched a new charity GoFundMe, and we strongly encourage all viewers to consider donating. Please consider helping us reach our campaign goals, as all proceeds go towards funding our company and into forming our programs and operations to give those in need access to free resources for coping skills and connections to get them through this national health crisis. The charity GoFundMe link will be posted in the description of all future streaming platform videos. Thank you, and don't forget to check out our company website, cpmha.com. And remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell in order to receive notifications each time we post a new podcast.